The clock is ticking down. I said the click is clocking down, but it's of course the clock is ticking down to a new episode of The Place. As always, let some things go. If you have been following me for a while, that normally I start this with a nice tune, but for some reason, iTunes, I say Facebook wants to block me for that. So strange as that is. Anyhow, welcome here at The Place. We are about to start. Yeah, this is Jean here at The Place with episode 223 already of Tell. If you don't know what this is about, we are here actually every Tuesday, or I must say actually almost every other Tuesday, because last week I was in Florida doing other things, so I skipped a week. But normally we are here every Tuesday on Facebook and YouTube Live and some other channels at 12 o'clock Dallas time, which is, if that's no summer or winter time, it's about 7 o'clock Europe time. Anyhow, we'll figure that out as we keep going, right? So welcome to The Place, episode 223, the Everyday Life Lessons. Oh yeah, before I forget, of course, don't forget to like us here on YouTube Live and the YouTube Live channel, or on my YouTube channel. Actually, if you subscribe, you can see all the previous episodes of The Place as well, and some other things as we progress. So I hope you do that. And then let's get started. We all want to know it. Do I have a purpose in life? That is the title of today. And this falls mainly under the life energy, the divine energy. As you know by now, if you have been following Jean for a little bit here on Facebook Live, there are 5 life energies. Someone is writing me already. Okay, and the 5 energies are, if you don't know them yet, then the first one is physical energy. That's basically your health, your nutrition, and what have you not. Your mental energy is actually how do you have an internal talk with yourself. A very important energy that I often address here at The Place. Creative energy, research actually showed that specifically in adults, that's the energy that actually lacks most people of. So because we lose a little bit our imagination as we grow up. We'll not talk about that today, but I'm just telling you right now, right? Manifestation energy sounds maybe like a strange title, but it's actually what do you produce in life, you could write a book like I did, that's something that I manifested, or you serve other people. That's also a form of manifestation. But today it's all about divine energy, also called a sense of being or a sense of purpose. Makes all sense today, right? So welcome here at The Place. It's going to be a pretty, tough topic, so to speak, and it probably cannot be done in one episode, but I'll see how far I go. I read some, I always do that, so full disclosure, when I prepare a topic for The Place, then you have a little bit of an idea how I do that. Or for Tell, it's the same thing, the Everyday Life Lesson podcast, if you only listen to me on the podcast. And I typically like to read some blogs from mostly psychologists or philosophers on a certain topic. And I use material from them. But in this case, I came across an article from Mr. Mike Brooks, and I probably will quote him twice in this episode. So let's start with that right now. So Mr. Brooks, thank you for your contribution and the things that you do in the world. As far as most of us know, we only have one life to live. Most people do that unless you believe in reincarnation, but still, then it's still the life that you have now that you need to make count. The odds against our existence are quite literally beyond comprehension. So what he means with that, I think I did once a topic on that too, what the odds are actually for life on Earth. So we take that always for granted. But if you think about the number of variables that are necessary to match, the variables that needs to match to make it simply possible for life to exist on Earth, you would be shocked. And this is not religious talk. This is literally, backed up by science. So let me give you an example. if the Earth would just be a little bit bigger than it is right now, then the gravity of Earth would be too big for us to be under. Now, maybe then we have stronger bodies, so you could say that works too. But if the Earth would just be a little bit smaller, then the whole atmosphere would disappear straight into in the universe or wherever it goes, right? So a thing like the Earth needs to have a planet. In this case, needs to have a certain amount of mass to hold, the atmosphere. Atmosphere is basically gas, right? And the gas needs to, cannot be drawn too close to the Earth because then it has no function. But if there's no gravity or not enough, like on the moon, there is no possibility for any atmosphere. So that's one of the variables that you could see. And I could, go on and on how many variables there are that actually truly need to match up for life to be possible on any planet. Now, then you can say, of course, there are billions and billions of galaxies out there. What are the chances that there is more life out there? Probably very small, but it's still enough that it is there. But, life is relatively short, right? So for life to exist at the same time, even in this vast universe, is a very small chance, but it could be true. I mean, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about today. I'm just saying, that, following Mike Brooks, that it is, if you think about the odds against our existence are quite literally beyond comprehension. Out of some cosmic miracle that we don't appreciate enough, well, that's what I say, but maybe you do appreciate it, then it's really, really a big chance that we, actually really are here. So you could say that we actually won some sort of the live lottery, right? And then from that point on is saying, if that is so special, if something, if someone gives you something really valuable, then you appreciate that, right? Someone, your wife, your spouse, your kids, your parents, if they give you something really special, you value it, right? So life, no matter how it's given, whether you believe in evolution, whether you believe in a God that created it, it is in some sort of a way given to us, and it is very special. Just trust the science in this. So do we actually take that for granted, or do we actually feel there is maybe more to it? Now, you could also say with all these variable chance, then it's just simply a truly big, coincidence that we exist. Yeah. Let me give you an example, and it's a known example, and it's called the mousetrap example, why coincidence actually doesn't always work. So to build a mousetrap, you need a little piece of plywood and a little smaller piece of plywood that goes up and down, and your little hook on which it's kind of a little bit actually a bad example if I think about it, because it's about killing mice, and I don't like to kill things so much. But anyhow, I was going there anyhow. You need to have some sort of a thing that, that hold the spring down, and you need the spring, of course, and then you need to have a little piece of. You don't need a lot of components to build a mousetrap, but quite a few actually to make it work, right? So you need to and then you need to bring the spring down. So if you have all these components, even in the right form, right? Even if you have all the components in the right form, but they're not assembled yet, and I would just throw them in the air until they start to assemble themselves. Now, there is a possibility that one time they come down in exactly the way, a mousetrap needs to be built. But you can already see that those chances are very small. And those are only maybe 4 or 5 components. If you think about life that we have right now, then the components that makes us, not only thinking about the body that we have, but also the atmosphere that we have and the earth that we need to live on, for all that to come together in such a way that life can exist, you could say that is a miracle. Yeah, whether you believe there was a higher form involved, so people that don't believe in God, but they believe They believe there is some sort of an intellect in there. They call it the intellectual design, right? So scientists use that term nowadays to not say God, but they say that there needs to be some sort of an intervention. They just don't know what energy source that is that actually made that happen. Because if you know something about probability, then the probability that could happen, life on Earth, it's astronomical. You can't almost fathom that you cannot calculate it. That seriously, you can't, right? So you could say we won the life lottery, right? And if you have won the life lottery, maybe we should have a little bit more appreciation for that. And one of the people who's saying that is, okay, then maybe everything has a purpose then. Or is it still just chance, right? Is it just still chance? I'll leave that up to you to come to the final conclusion of that. But, I'm just going to try, to go a little bit deeper into, what it is. What is purpose of life? On a related note, how are we live in a way that fulfills our purpose? Another way to think of this is if we are the winners of the cosmic lottery, then how are we supposed to spend our winnings, right? If just recently in the US, there was someone who won 1.2 billion in a lottery. How would that person spend that money? It's that's also another number that you can almost not. But for weeks or months, no one won the lottery, and it kept adding up. And at some point in time, it was 1.2 billion dollars, biggest lottery ever, I believe. So first of all, there is a lot of positive mental health benefits of having a purpose. So that's a good thing, right? So let's first, whet your appetite, so to speak, like, okay, now I want it. I think it's really good. I don't have it yet, but I want it. So research, actually more and more research around having a purpose starts to emerge. And that is actually because a relatively new field in psychology, which is called happiness psychology. Yes, when I saw that for the first time, I had to laugh a little bit too. But if you go a little bit deeper into what it actually stands for, it's maybe actually a really good field to research, because the older traditional way of psychology was only looking at, what is wrong with people, mental problems, and positive psychology or happiness psychology is actually a little bit more what coaches are doing for a long time, is, looking at life, from a positive things. If you have a good life, that doesn't mean there is nothing for you to improve anymore. We typically go to a doctor when we're sick. Maybe we should go more to a doctor to prevent sickness. So positive psychology or happiness psychology is actually doing that. Traditional psychology typically comes into action when something is wrong with you. Does that make any sense? Right? So research shows that people who have a strong sense of purpose in their lives are better able to feel good, to behave well, and then those two who are miserable or have no purpose in life. And it's less likely that someone with a purpose-driven life has a heart attack, strokes, dementia even. So I think that is something that at least me, with a mother who is affected by dementia and Alzheimer, actually, is motivated to look into, how is that? I look at several things that could help us to stop Alzheimer and dementia. I'm not a specialist at all. It's just a personal thing that I do. And if dance is another thing, by the way. And apparently, having a purpose and living a purposeful life is another way to stay more mental and physical healthy, right? I wrote more about it, but let's skip that for now. Otherwise, we will never finish this in, let's say, 40 minutes. A happy and meaningful life can contribute to improving our brain function. Now, who does not want that, right? Including learning things that are useful in the future. People who have a good reason tend to have fewer instances of depression. So people with a good reason, and this means with a purpose-driven life. However, just because it is healthy to have a sense of purpose doesn't mean that you know how to get a purpose. Does that make sense? Now that we all know how good it is for us, that doesn't immediately mean you know how to get it. So it was just, like I said, to whet your appetite. And by now you all should say, yeah, sure, I want that. I want to have a purposeful life because I don't have it yet. Or maybe you do already have it yet, or maybe you don't. You know, so let me know in the chat on Facebook or wherever you are if you have it or you don't, right? So then we can talk about that too. So what is my purpose? Why am I here? The answer to these questions seems to be very important, and many individuals actually struggle with them, right? At times we all think about it, you know. What is the point in life? What is the point of my relationship? What is the point of my job? What is the point of anything that I do? If you cannot find an answer to that, or you really are desperate to find an answer for that and you can't find it, that could quickly lead to depression. Because if you don't have any purpose in your life, even if it's a small purpose, doesn't have to be a big thing. You doesn't have to, you know, say, you know, I'm going to cure cancer or something else or bring world peace. You know, life can be really hard. You know, so and I noticed that too. So I'm personally connected. I like to always bring into the place and tell the Everyday Life Lesson podcast some of my personal stories too. I saw that with my dad. My dad, you know, had not an easy life. And but when he got retired from the military, we didn't notice it as kids, but bit by bit, after a while, we saw that you know, he felt that he had nothing to do in life anymore. And in the beginning, it was more maybe like boredom or something like that. But then he started to complain more and more, like, you know, what is the point? What is the sense of life? He lost his appetite for life completely because he had no goal in life anymore. You know, even his kids, and then he lost the son, which was horrible, of course, my brother, who died at the age of 55, which is way too young, obviously, because and that was a hard blow for my dad, because he said, you know, that is unnatural, right? It's unnatural for a parent to bury the kids, and it's a second kid he had to bury. So I do understand some of these things, but he had that for in maybe a little bit lesser form in the beginning, but probably in the last 15, maybe even 20 years of his life, he struggled with that. I mean, that's horrible, right? That's a long time if you think about it. And specifically with all the things that we have around us, and maybe with too many distractions that we have around us, we hear younger people more often say that they don't know exactly what they want to achieve in life. And that's where it starts and can go wrong. So maybe you should first then explore what the definition of purpose is, right? Now, we can come up with all our own definitions, but I kind of looked it up and listened to people who probably have more knowledge about this than I do, although I don't know if that's true. In contrast to a typical day-to-day activities objective, you know, every day we typically have an objective. We have to go to work, or we have to finish our homework if you're a student, or maybe you need to prepare a dinner, you know, which is an objective, right? If you have to prepare a dinner, then you have a few other tasks before that to finish before you reach that goal of having a dinner on the table. So, so in contrast to those objectives, a purpose is more profound and far-reaching. So it goes way beyond just the mundane things in life. Not saying that one is immediately more important than the other, right? So purpose is more externally focused, and it involves things that are related to more things than just me, than oneself. So the first thing, it is longer term and typically more profound. And secondly, it is not focused so much only on me. It could be on you, but it is not only focused on you. And it's more external focus. So purpose also refers to accomplishments, progress, and completions of things. So it sounds a little bit like goals, and I do that on purpose because, you know, last week, well, actually the week before that, I actually debunked a little bit how goal setting for life actually doesn't work so well. So I'm going to replace that with maybe something that is stronger, and that is purpose, right? And in purpose, you can find maybe some goals that you truly want to do. I want to build a house. I want to have 5 kids. I want to have a happy marriage or something like that. Some of those goals that we talked about. But some of these goals, like I want to have a happy marriage, you cannot turn that in a SMART goal. You cannot say, I want to have a happy marriage within 2 years, and I want to be accountable for it, and so on and so on. So you see, it doesn't work. And definitely, if it comes to purpose, it's not so measurable. You cannot say, I want to fulfill my purpose by 2015 or something. No, purpose goes way more beyond that. It has a lot to do with mindset. It has a lot to do with your day-to-day activities that goes into the right. The right is, that's of course subjective, but goes into the direction of what you think your purpose is. Now, purpose creates more opportunities, and it will help us to establish, it will help us, right? Underline the word help here, to establish other goals and values that are meaningful to us. So it helps us. So it's an underlying thing if we found our purpose, that can do it well. Let me give you just an example, right? And then I'll tell you a little bit what I feel my purpose is. And that doesn't mean it's the only purpose, and it doesn't also mean that it can be replaced. And it sounds like I'm trying to say something, it has to be in this, but it's just what I do. So just take it for what it is. I feel that I have to do something about sexual abuse in the world. I want to help to bring that number down. I want to empower women who have been affected by sexual abuse, and also men. Don't be immediately, offended if I say women. But, I have a little bit easier way to talk to women for various reasons. We can talk about that another time. And so that is, I feel that is my purpose in life. My purpose in life is to help other people see that they can live a life of passion and purpose after sexual abuse. Does that make sense? My image is going to be. So that is my purpose. I know it's a big purpose, and it doesn't have to be that big. It feels big, but if I can just talk to one person that I feel that's already helped, I already feel really good about it. Does that make sense? I don't think that I am some sort of Mother Teresa that immediately have to change the whole world. I do wish that sometimes, but I do sometimes get an email from someone that, said, hey, Jean, you helped me. And that for me is already very fulfilling, remember that word fulfilling. Now, so that's my purpose. That's what I purpose. But one of the goals that I had was writing a book. And that book is in the light of that purpose. So under your purpose, yes, you can have very concrete goals, right? Does that make sense? But your goals typically are not your purpose, right? Writing my book once this was finished, and then what? That was a good goal, right? And then what? If I had, remember what I told you, if you lock yourself too hard down in a goal, then you have to think about it, what will happen after you reach that goal? A purpose is something that you don't necessarily reach. Does that make sense? It has to do with accomplishments along the way. It has to do with progression along the way. It has to do with completion of tasks along the way. But in itself, purpose is maybe not something that you can achieve as a whole. Does that make sense? Yeah? So that gives us purpose, and it drives you forward. Okay, so purpose does not have a specific definition or boundary. It does not matter if you're a volunteer or a receptionist or a carpenter or a teacher or a technician or a parent or a physician. It doesn't really matter. You cannot say, oh, Jean's purpose is much better than another purpose. No, there's no such thing as that. So having a sense of purpose in what you do, that's what matters. So having a purpose in what you do matters. So it doesn't matter what you do, but having a sense of purpose in what you do matters. Because, there is this philosophy that if we don't know what the purpose of the universe is, to use that word again, how can I say that someone who brings the mail around, has a lesser purpose than I, who try to save people, who have been abused. Now, in the eye of of the people, this sounds like a lofty and a really, good goal. But I would never say that I have a higher purpose than anyone else, because we don't even understand the purpose of the universe. So don't try to say that another purpose is more or less than your purpose. Don't also put yourself down. Does that make any sense? The sense of purpose has something to do with, yes, it is inside you, but it has a lot to do with what you put out there in the world. And everyone has a little contribution to that. It's like a puzzle piece, right? The puzzle is not complete if we don't put all the puzzle pieces together. So to say that one puzzle piece is more important than the other one is a justification and a judgment, which we should stay far away from all times. Does that make sense? So for a lot of people, if you ask them what is your purpose in life, the answer comes often from what role or job they currently have. Now, that in itself is not so wrong, but let me give you an example, right? So I once had a client, and if she listens, I hope she does. By the way, she had a hard time finding good energy. And I worked with this person, by the way, because she believed she could never find a good partner for herself. She said, I always meet the wrong people and I ended up in the wrong relationships. Does your coaching provide something in that? It was the first time that someone asked me like that, like, okay, that's an interesting question. I said, well, the only thing I can do is help you to work on yourself. And my hypothesis is then that if you change yourself, that you will also meet other people. So if you buy into that story, true or not, then we can start and coach together. And we did. And one of the things that I always do when I start to coach with people is ask them, hey, what do you do on a daily basis? And so I have a little, exercise to do that. And she wrote down, I go to work from 9 till 5 or from 8 till 5, whatever it is. And every day she did that. And I said to her, no, you don't go to work every day. She said, yes, I do. I said, no, you don't. And then she said, yes, I do. I said, but that's pretty sad if you put down work every day. I said, what do you do at work? Well, she said, I'm a school teacher. I said, okay, and what do you do? What is your role as a school teacher? Well, and after a couple of discussions, she said, well, actually, I take care of a big part of the upbringing of those kids. I said, yes, you do. And I think that is very admirable. I mean, when I have a headache, I can say to my dance clients, I'm not going to teach you today. But when you as a school teacher have a headache, you still have to teach, that's a hard job. I said, that is so true. I said, how many parents of those kids are happy that you're there? Oh, they're very happy. I said, cool. Would you do me a favor and write down for me that you go from 8 till 5, that you say, I do, I help to bring up, fill in the names every day. How does that feel? And she did that. She did that in a very beautiful way, and it made her feel very empowered. Does that make sense? She had more purpose in the job than just saying I'm a teacher, or just saying I'm a director, or just saying I'm a CEO, or just saying, we often define ourselves with the titles that we have, and the titles that we have are completely empty. They don't mean, and I wanted to use a really bad word, they don't mean a thing. Let's put it that way. You can fill in what that means, what a thing means. So that's what it is, right? So can you find in yourself, no matter what job you do, what is the function that you do, and then definitely in relationship to other people. Where do you pick up the garbage? Can you imagine? I mean, we had that in Paris. I remember that I lived in Paris, and there was this strike. I mean, I believe in the Netherlands, country that I was born in, there's a strike now for public transportation. But there you go. You feel the function of those people when they are on strike. Now, whether you get angry at them or whether you feel that they are justified to have a strike, that is beyond this thing. That's not what I do. But you can clearly feel that a bus driver then suddenly is not a bus driver. The bus driver is actually the person that takes you from A to B, or better yet, takes you from home to your work, so that you can do your function in life. Does that make sense? So it's way more interconnected than you think. And it should be way more interconnected too. So if you can already start there with the purpose of your life, to define it not so much by the title that you have or the role that you have, but more by what you do. What is the function that you do, and hopefully in relationship to other people. A lot of people, look down on people who pick up the garbage. But, I promise you, if they don't do it for a few weeks, you would you would, and it's so easy to step over those people who do that. And then we go specifically, if you're a white collar worker, if you go to your offices and you sit behind your computers and have your master of the universe meetings, we sometimes forget that those people, I'm not saying that is you, by the way, I'm just saying that happens a lot. Okay, so now, if we have those titles, that's another way to defining that. But then still, if you have those titles and you have those big names, say you were I used to be a director at a big company, or you have been a CEO or something like that. What happens when you retire? A lot of people, when they retire, suddenly they don't have a meaning in life anymore, because they identified themselves way too much with the job that they were doing. So I'm not saying that's bad per se, but I just want to warn you that if you want to work on your purpose, it is maybe something that goes beyond the job that you do. The job that you do could be part of your purpose, but is not necessarily your purpose. Does that make any sense? Yeah, so it could be part of the purpose, but it's not necessarily the end game of the purpose. So things that brings us to the point. So what is purpose then? Is it the same throughout your entire life? Is it something that comes from outside of us? Like some more like a religious or a spiritual point of view, or has it come from within ourselves? So. Is it linked to good and bad? Can you have, can someone who says, no, I say that's not an easy to answer question. That's not an easy to answer question. I say goodbye to someone who is always with me on Zoom, and he or also on Facebook Live. It has to. Is it linked to someone? So first of all. Has it come from from outside ourselves? Like, say there is a God-given purpose or something else. I don't know the answer to that. I will say something about it, but and it's nice if you had some sort of a premonition, if you had some sort of a divine guidance or something like that, and it came to you in a dream or in a prayer or a meditation. All good, all good. I sometimes actually felt that I had that, and then I can give you an example here. When I was writing this book, I very strongly felt that it missed a component, and it actually missed a component that became very essential for the work that I'm doing, and it missed a component of those 5 energies. And one night I woke up and I just wrote that whole chapter, or that concept actually, because there's way more to write about those things than I did in that book, is I wrote the concept down of the 5 energies in one night. And I felt that came from some sort of a higher source. It was just that was just my clarification of where that was coming from. Now, whether that's true or not is completely irrelevant for me, because how many people don't get that, and how many times don't I get any inspiration of that? So I would highly suggest you to not always wait for that. Now, meditation, by the way, and opening your mind to what could be your purpose is a great thing, and I will come back onto that later. But in my mind, purpose doesn't always have to come from these outside sources. If they do, you know, great. If they don't, then there need to be other ways to find a purpose, you know. And then secondly, it is a little bit linked to the place where you are in the time that we live in. The things that the generation before me or before us had to do to survive during World War II, that is a whole different thing. I bet soldiers in that time, military people, they believed that their purpose was to free Europe or to, and kill the enemy. Now, killing in itself is always a bad thing. We would all agree with that, but that felt like a higher purpose then. And specifically, if you listen to people like the leaders that we had at that time, they talked a lot about the purpose that we had to free the people in Europe. And then later on, we actually found out what gruesome things happened in Nazi Germany at the time, and it felt that we did a good thing, right? But I'm sure a lot of bad things happened also on the side of the good people. So purpose also has something to do with the times we live in, and often also in the place we live in as well. Yeah, and it's also very culture bound, right? Now, even a research, if you talk about research, then the research actually points mostly to how important it is to have a purpose, and it gives you some tips how to get a purpose, but not so much, to be honest. Yeah, not so much. It makes it sound like it's really easy to find a purpose. Now, well, if it was so easy, then there would not be so many people who are actually going around with almost no thing. So, but let me with no guidance, so to speak. So not only purpose is correlated to health, which there's a lot of research done too. Research also showed that it alters our perception of the things that we do. Um, so, as an example, here is if you have a daunting task to do, and this is research done where people who were selected they were split in two groups. People who did not know what the task was yet, but some people with a sense of purpose and other people who claimed to not have so much of a sense of purpose. And they both had to climb a very steep hill. A hill had nothing to do with their purpose, by the way. But the people who had a purpose in life felt that that task was way more easy to do than the people with no purpose. So typically, and I can say typically because these researchers are not small researchers, are big researchers, people who actually live a purposeful life also overcome easier things in life as well. So harder tasks that they have to do. Now, before I forget, I also want to say something because that is a lot of my audience is the people who are abused. The reason why it's sometimes hard for people that are abused, and that's why I wrote the book Broken Silence, Living with Passion and Purpose After Sexual Abuse, after sexual abuse, have a hard time to find a purpose because their world was shaken. One of the things that we want to do, people, is as human beings, we want to make sense of everything and we want to correlate everything. So we think it's very normal that, when the light is on red, that cars stop. Those are normal things for us. When someone doesn't do that, me and my partner had it a few weeks ago when someone actually hit the red light, and it doesn't make any sense to us. We were talking about, we were so close to have a really, really, really big accident that we talked even 2 days later. We still talk about it, how bad that could have happened. For some reason, miraculously, that car went through two cars, not hitting us, not hitting the other car, and he still was kind of angry at us that we did that. So something that was normal for us, stopping, it broke. So what happened with people with an abuse experience is, in my case, I called it that way, people that were supposed to keep me safe, I needed protection from. So people who should protected me, I needed protection from, which does not make any sense at all, specifically not in the mind of a kid. And once that correlation, that normal the normal correlation of meaning in life, what is normal, is kind of violated, it takes a long time for to repair that. That's what I made my study in, how to help people with that. Does that make any sense? So if something like that has overcome you, and I talk about purpose as the easiest thing to do, this could be one of the reasons, why it is so hard for you to find a purpose in life, because of the things that you have had been through in life. And there could be all kind of abuse. I talk a lot about sexual and child abuse, but it could also be domestic violence, or even PTSD is the reason why sometimes people lose, or very often actually, I would say, lose a purpose in life, and cannot find it back. Okay, so. So then you actually could break down people into, and that's for simplicity reasons, by the way, that would be oversimplification of things, that you could put people in 4 different types of groups. But if it comes to having a sense of purpose, you could people bringing in 4, and there's no judgment of it. So people with no or hardly any sense of purpose, I already gave you. Sometimes there's a really strong reason why that is, that they lost the sense of purpose. So that's one group. Then you have people driven by a false sense of purpose. So thinking that their job, being a CEO is so important. And being a CEO, by the way, could be very important. But if you only look at a title, or then that could be a false sense of purpose, right? So, like I said, sometimes it's just a nuance. Thinking too much about the title and not so much about the function that you have in society. A false sense of purpose. The second group that I see is people with a sense of purpose. They just don't know what their purpose is, which is probably the largest group, right? And then you have, that would be an ultimate group, and there are definitely good examples of that, and I love to read about them, people who are very purpose driven. Now, although I do think I have a purpose, it doesn't mean that I constantly every day know what to do. Right now, I don't. Most of the time I do. I wake up and I go, and I go again. Is it, so I have that a little bit. But, there are actually times I think, is this it? It's kind of normal. People with a sense of purpose, they just, they think they know that they need a sense of purpose. They just don't know what it is, or they can reach it, you know? So, but in a large group of those people, the ones that have no sense of purpose, hardly any sense of purpose, or they don't know what the purpose is, they often start to settle for a pretty mediocre life. They just go by the day and think, this is what it is, right? And that's, sadly enough, if you might think it's not true, but it is actually about 80 or 90% of the people that we have. Now, there are 4 levels of purpose. If you want to give it a little bit more context and what is purpose, you could say there is the purpose of the personal accumulative, attaining wealth, status, and success. So it sounds like I have a judgment over that, but I don't. Many people in our individualistic and competitive modern society derive that sense of purpose in these ways. So there are definitely good people who just want to accumulate wealth, and maybe they do really good things with that wealth. I don't know that. That could be a thing. I do know that if I talk about those 5 energies, most of those people, they love to hear more about the first 4, which, remember, physical, mental, creative, and manifestation energy, but they don't like to hear so much about the divine energy, or the sense of being, or knowing that everything is actually connected, as I already said to you. Later on, often in life, they actually come back to that point and say, hey, I still feel there's some sort of a hollowness in me. Can we talk about that? Yeah. Then you have the people who are more altruistic and idealistic driven. Probably me. At a higher level of personal development, that's what some people call it, but I'm very afraid to call it higher and lower level because of the reason what I told you before. We don't know that, right? It sounds a little bit more fancy, but we don't know that. But I do like to think that, if life doesn't mean a lot if you don't put it in service of other people, right? So the desire of personal gain resides, and one sense of purpose becomes more broader, and not to improve my own situation only, but also the situations of others, right? And I think a lot of people do that, right? And then you have, of course, the people that are a little bit more floating or in the air, right? The personal and spiritual development. And then, so more personal development and exploration of their own creativity, or even going on to a more the spiritual side, and they find purpose in that as well. And then you have a little bit as last but not least, and that is maybe more the Taoistic type of approach, that you give up anything. You don't connect any, you have no attachment to any concept of what I just talked about, or earthly concept, and see that there is a purpose in that. Now, I don't know what's good. I just can give you what my opinion is. And my opinion is that I do believe the number two, what I said, is what does life mean if you don't put it in service of other people, is I think a strong one. I think you can find a lot of purpose if you find a role in yourself, and like the teacher that I said, you quickly you more often have a role in that than you think, right? Even if you work in a production line or something like that, you might think like, man, actually I work for a really good product. And I might not be directly involved, but I may be indirectly involved of the well-being of other people. So that's a good way of looking at it. Well, so all this brought me, to maybe a slightly different conclusion than a lot of people wrote about. Is there a God-given purpose? Well, maybe. I don't know. And we can start and meditate long about it, but if you don't get any answers, then what do you do, right? I do think that some people feel guided by a higher power, and sometimes I do feel that, and that's great. If you have that, great, but if you don't, there is something else that you can do. So then what can you do to find a person purpose if that's not the case? Right now, first of all, I would like you to think slightly different about a purpose. If purpose is more a skill, then it is something that can be trained, honed, and developed. And I do believe that purpose is actually a skill. It is something that you found out for yourself that excites you, and that you may be good at, maybe not, but it is you're passionate about and you want to bring to the world. So I have a super simple exercise that I want you to do, and you can do that right now, or if you listen to this recording later at Tell the Everyday Life Lesson podcast, then do it too. I've mentioned this exercise before, but just do it. Don't only listen to my podcasts, but also do a little bit the exercises if I give some, right? So here it is. Think about for yourself, what do you think actually is what the world needs? And it could be, maybe we need to get all the plastics out of the ocean. It could also something be a little bit more simpler, right? Maybe a little bit more friendliness. Who knows what that is, right? What is it for you? What when you think about what the world needs, what is it? Now, let me go a little bit deeper into it. No, I do believe that the plastics needs to go out of the world. I do. I'm just not so passionate and excited about it as, fighting sexual abuse. But other people who are a little bit more in the plastic, they are maybe not, they also believe that sexual abuse needs to go out of the world, but just not that passionate about it as I am. And that's good. That's perfect. That's why we are together in the world, because then, it's not to push away. I will try to do my best to use less plastic straws or something. And for those people, that's nothing. I should do all plastics out of my life. But that's maybe a little bit how I go into the direction. But I go way further, maybe trying to help people who are sexually abused. And so write down for you, what is it that you think the world needs? Okay, so you did that, right? Piece of paper. Now I want you to put that piece of paper away and pretend that you didn't write it. But it's there. You can read it when it's done. So then you just write down one or two things that you feel that you are really good at, right? Or that you have competence in, or want to gain competence in. That's also good, right? What are you motivated to do? It doesn't matter whether you want to learn a language, when you want to do better in mathematics. It doesn't really matter what it is. When you want to be dancing, it doesn't really matter. Write down one or two things, not more, what you truly are good at already and passionate about, or want to be good at and passionate about. in a relatively short term. So write that down. Okay, I give you a few moments to do that. Now, once you did that, then take that other piece of paper, right, and then look at them together. You have on one hand you have your world problem, and the other hand you have your little, list with what you are really, good at, and then think about it. What is that skill that I have that I'm good at? How can I help that to make that problem that I saw a little bit smaller? You don't have to solve it immediately, right? So I give you a really good example. I always like to tell stories and I talk a lot. You can see that, you can hear that a lot, and I write a lot. That's what I do. I love that. So for me, it was a very, like easy to say, why don't I write a book about something that I'm passionate about, right? And maybe that helps to make that problem of sexual abuse a little bit smaller. And it did. I had numerous. It became a bestseller, by the way. But I had numerous people who reached out to me and said, "Man, this book was very instrumental in taking my next step in life." So that's how it is. I mean, I'm very humbled by it. Does that make any sense? So don't immediately dismiss what you have. Don't immediately dismiss your own competences. Don't immediately dismiss your skills that you have or the role that you have in life. Just separate those two first, your world problem and the things that you're good at, and then put them together. And just, if you can lower it down with just a little bit, if there's only one person that you could help, how awesome would that be, right? It doesn't immediately have to be your job or your day-to-day life, and maybe it will be at one day, who knows. But that's where a purpose-driven life starts, right? Can you see a problem that other people have, and can you contribute a little bit to solving that problem? That would be a good way. That's my take on it, right? That's definitely my take on it. Now, another take on it is, no, let me leave it there, actually. Let me leave it there for now. It is it's 10 minutes to 1 already. Purpose-driven life. Just give me some feedback. If you say, hey, I thought that was interesting, your take on that, yeah, then, then do that. Don't forget to, subscribe on YouTube. Let's go back a little bit to the Monday things and lives too. But then if you want to hear more, I can definitely go a little bit deeper. I probably will in one of the future episodes of TEL, the Everyday Life Lesson podcast. This was number 123, or The Place. Next week we'll be back with another episode. So this was Jean. It was really good seeing you here. Thank you for the reactions that I had. In the meantime, I didn't place them all here. If you want to join me for Zoom for the last 10 minutes, then you can certainly do that here. Find your email that you had, or just drop me a personal message and I, let you in. If not, then I'll see you back next week with another episode of The Place. And this week's topic was, we all want to know it. Do I have a purpose in life? This was Shah with The Place, and I say bye-bye.